Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Dasha Burns.
And yes, it really is June already. It is Monday, June the 2nd, in fact. Can you believe it?
Unbelievable. I thought that was fake news.
It's real horrible truth. This is the Playbook Podcast. If you didn't know this, listeners, you should have known it already. Dasha launched her new solo podcast yesterday, The Conversation. Just quickly tell us about it, Dasha.
So the idea behind the show is to create a new kind of Sunday political show, a fresh take on the old format, have real conversations. Like the title says it all. I want to get into not just the news of day with people who matter in our politics and our culture, but the why behind it all, and really learn about them, learn about their philosophy for the levers of power that they are pulling. We'll talk to Republicans, we'll talk to Democrats, we'll talk to business leaders. It's going to run the gamut. If you are having an impact or are pushing to have an impact, we are eager to talk to you. And we'll also be talking to, as we did this week with Politico colleagues, this week it was Kyle Cheney and Jonathan Martin, about the behind the scenes of how they're getting some of these scoops and really getting the inside details on the great reporting that we have in our newsroom.
Your main guest this week was TV star and MAGA political figure, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Just tell us something surprising he said to you in that conversation.
The one and only Dr. Oz was our inaugural guest. Look, one thing that surprised me, and in this interview, if you haven't listened to it, we talk about all sorts of stuff. We talk about Medicaid, we talk about drug pricing, we talk about what he wants to see, how he wants to use AI in our healthcare system, his background as a TV personality, as a surgeon. We talk about my appendectomy a little bit even. But
wow.
But one thing that surprised me in the conversation was the way that he talked about government employees, particularly employees at CMS. He talked about them with real reverence, almost with a lot of great respect. And he talked about how surprised he was at the wealth of knowledge and enthusiasm. And that just stuck out to me in a time when, in the era of Doge, when government workers have been so vilified, he really was very optimistic about the people working inside of the government. And I think that wasn't what I expected.
A pleasant surprise.
That's right. That's right.
If you haven't already subscribed to The Conversation with Dasha Burns, please do so at the podcast player of your choice, or go to YouTube. You can watch it all. It's wonderful Technicolor, or whatever we call it these days. Let's talk about this podcast. Let's talk about the three big stories driving the day in DC this morning, Dasha. The first one, this horrific attack that happened in Boulder, Colorado yesterday. Horrible footage online that some of you will already have seen.
Devastating.
Parade being held for Israeli hostages who are still being held by Hamas. Witnesses, and indeed there's video footage of it, Molotov cocktails being thrown into the crowd. Multiple people were burned. These were elderly people, some with life-threatening injuries. It's being referred to as a terror attack. It's about to become very political by the looks of it, Dasha, because there were people in the Trump administration saying publicly last night that the person who's now in custody, who's accused of this attack, is somebody who came to the country, overstayed their visa, and quote unquote was allowed to stay by Biden, in the way that the Trump administration often politicizes these sorts of things. If that's the way this story is going, it's going to become a very political story very quickly.
Look, first and foremost, as we talk about it as journalists, I've been on the scene of these sorts of devastating incidents, and you have to remember these are human beings, these are human lives that we are talking about here. So, first and foremost, that has to be front and center. And I hope it is for political leadership at all levels as well. However, this issue, first of all, has long been political, right? Israel-Palestine. In this moment, since October 7th, 2023, and as this administration has come down really hard on these protests, and the issues of Israel and Palestine have become intertwined with issues of immigration, with really complex foreign policy and domestic policy, this is now this pressure cooker. And the trend that we are seeing is that, yes, it is very likely that this is going to become political, potentially across the board, because this is the moment that we are in, and especially with such a sensitive issue that is so deeply personal for so many people. And now it was already life and death overseas. It's now life and death here on American soil.
And so harrowing, particularly for Jewish people, to see this happening, because of course it was less than 2 weeks ago that we saw the murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers here in DC outside an event on the streets of Washington. You see the way that people are feeling about this. It's going to be a story that's going to be Very much prominent in the news all day.
I will say during the campaign, during the election, after October 7th, there are a lot of Jewish folks that I spoke with that were more inclined than they would have been in the past to vote for President Trump because they feel like he is fighting for them on this issue. So there are people that will say he's politicizing it, the administration is maybe going too far. There are others who have also said, as Jewish people, we have lived under oppression, we have felt targeted. And so finally, there's somebody that is willing to call this stuff out. I mean, this is not simple, and it's just so deeply personal for so many people.
Two other big things that people are going to be talking about today, and frankly, all week this week in American politics. The economy is going to dominate the week again. We're expecting a phone call, Dasha, between Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping maybe this week about tariffs. That's certainly what the administration are hinting at, although it's not been confirmed. That will be a big moment, of course, if that happens, given the China-US trade talks appear to be deadlocked.
Oh, this has been what everyone's been waiting for. When are these two men actually going to talk?
Totally. So that's one to watch for this week, although we don't know for sure. The other thing, of course, that is dominating the news, and the other thing I want to get into with you now, Dasha, is Ukraine, because we just saw this extraordinary moment in the war yesterday.
This is one of the hottest weekends in this conflict in the years that it's been ongoing.
You spent last year on the campaign trail, basically following Donald Trump everywhere. What were you doing the week before Christmas 2023, do you reckon?
Is this a trick question?
I was thinking back and I was thinking I was probably like doing a bit of Christmas shopping, starting to drink too much with colleagues at work in preparation for Christmas. At that moment, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was sitting down with the head of his Secret Service and planning an outrageous attack on Russia. And he said yesterday it was a year and 6 months, and I think he said 9 days later, that we have executed that plan. This thing was so long in the making. They were smuggling more than 100 drones into the heart of Russia. They smuggled these wooden cabins into Russia. They hid the drones in the roofs of the cabins. Somehow the cabin roofs open remotely. They got all the people out again, and they sat and they waited. And then the day they decide to do it, they press the button, or maybe quite a few buttons, and off these things fly, and they take out 1/3 of Russia's strategic bombers in one morning at sites right across Russia. This is not like on the Ukraine border. One of these airfields,
deep in Siberia, like
literally 3,500 miles from the border. That's as far as it is from where I am now to my house in London.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been an attack like this before in modern warfare. Like, this is an unprecedented thing, right?
No, and it is so huge for Ukraine. It is such a massive operation and a demonstration of their capabilities, and it's pretty devastating and embarrassing for Russia. I mean, morale has got to be at an all-time low right now there.
Totally. I mean, Putin thought he was going to get this war done in like a week in 2022 or something, right? Like, he didn't think they'd be there in 2025, years later. I mean, these are the planes that carry their nuclear weapons. This is a big part of their strategic defense. Just getting
billions of dollars and...
Right. Getting taken out by these relatively cheap drones. I mean, it's amazing in many ways. It's amazing for what it means for the war. It's also amazing what it means for modern warfare and the capability of relatively small countries to take out big targets far away.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, countries whose resources, part of the reason that U.S. involvement is so huge is because they don't have the money, they don't have the resources,
Right.
They don't have the weaponry, and yet they were able to pull this off.
And of course, they've been begging America, they've been begging Biden, and now begging Trump to be allowed to have weapons and be allowed to use them that would do this sort of thing. And America said, no, you have to escalate the war. We're not going to let you do anything on this scale. They just found a way of doing it anyway.
They found a way. What I wonder, and what some of the experts I've talked to speculate, is it seems unlikely that the U.S. was not aware that this was coming. And if they didn't support it, at least tacitly agreed to it or greenlit it. It's full speculation, but something of this level. And by the way, what's been striking to me is we have heard crickets from the administration on it so far. It's been very quiet. And prior to this, the rhetoric, we've talked about this on this show over the last week, Trump's rhetoric has escalated significantly when it comes to Putin and Russia. So take those things together. Look, I think there are a lot of folks out there saying right now that The timing for Ukraine to do this is unfortunate given the peace talks that are supposed to be happening.
Would Zelensky have trusted Donald Trump with something like this? I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe. You mentioned the peace talks. Round 2 of these talks that have been happening in Istanbul are due to start today, Monday. Ukraine's negotiators are headed there right now. We're expecting those talks, which didn't really bear much fruit last time round, to begin again today. And Ukraine's argument in terms of ceasefire is that, well, we've been asking for a ceasefire for weeks.
Mhm.
Russia's saying no. They keep bombing us. So we've taken out the aircraft that were bombing us, and we still want a ceasefire. These are military targets, not Russian cities, the way that Russia is just bombarding those Ukrainian cities.
Right. And no troops were killed even. This is going after their infrastructure and what they are using to launch these attacks on Ukraine. And I think what Zelensky is trying to say is, we can do this,
Right.
but we don't want to. So let's come to the table.
I mean, Trump's argument famously in that Oval Office meeting that went so wrong for Zelensky back in February was that this guy doesn't hold any cards. That's what he kept saying about Zelensky, is right. He doesn't hold any cards in this war. Putin's got all the cards. Well, this is Zelensky saying, yeah, mate, I've still got a few in my locker. Where Trump goes from here is obviously the most important question. And we may hear something from him today on what he thought about this strike. The other thing that struck me about the Ukraine situation over the weekend, Dasha, was that Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator and obviously a good friend of Donald Trump, has been over in Ukraine and then over in Paris talking to some of the sort of allies in the war about the situation. He is still pushing this massive sanctions bill in the Senate that's got bipartisan support. And he says, this is ready to go. And this would change the game if Donald Trump would finally turn around and back it. And I just wonder, I don't know if you've got any sense of this. So far, the White House doesn't seem to be too interested in it. The fact that it's Lindsey Graham certainly makes it seem more possible to me that at some point they might just go, okay.
There's also been escalation from people like Graham, from some in the Republican Party saying, you got to be tougher on Putin. Trump's change in rhetoric, plus the relative quiet and the immediate aftermath of Ukraine's actions, gives a little bit of echo. Back in 2018, there was this sort of proxy battle between the US and Russia in Syria. And at a certain point, Putin had pushed Trump's buttons enough to where a bunch of this stuff was classified. Later, journalists were able to report on it. But basically, Americans took actions against Russian mercenaries in Syria. And Trump later bragged about it. It was classified. He bragged about it. Very Trump. But point being, history shows, have a limit with Putin. And potentially he reaches it and takes action, or he reaches it and decides to walk away. So those are the sort of 2 scenarios that we're looking at here.
And what Lindsey Graham is saying is that Putin's preparing a big new offensive. So it's kind of now or never with these sanctions. It feels like it's coming to a head.
This does seem like a really critical moment, right? Like something about this feels existential for the future of this conflict.
I bet we'll be talking about it again on the podcast in the days and weeks ahead. All right. We always try and finish on something a little bit lighter, especially when we've been talking about, World War III for the last 5 minutes.
We need the lighter stuff, especially now.
And what could be lighter than true love?
What's better than a little romance?
Tell us some lovely news from the Playbook newsletter this morning.
We have a little newsroom romance to announce. Our colleagues Alex Keeney and Elizabeth Ralph got engaged this weekend. So I assume the entire newsroom is going to be invited to the wedding, and I will be officiating. A little Jack Blanchard, Dasha Burns, wedding officiation.
Absolutely.
So Alex, Elizabeth, consider us. We are available.
Absolutely. We can do a live podcast from the ceremony. It'd be a beautiful thing.
That's genius.
Speaking as someone who obviously can't stop making podcasts, Dasha, I'm sure you'll be
I'm ready. I'm ready for the wedding pod. I'm into it.
Totally.
Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. Okay, that's all we've got time for today. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we'll be back tomorrow. So have a great Monday.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Bye-bye.